So I do hope that you do take this motion seriously. We create a Jewish equity coach so that when this happens again, because it will, someone will be there to help them.
That's the voice of David Baker, an Ottawa parent and father of the high school student who'd been the target of some anti-Semitism last month. Baker was speaking Tuesday evening at a committee meeting of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board to tell them firsthand how his family has been living since his son's experience made news headlines in December. And then again last week, after Ottawa police laid charges against the two students from Sir Robert Borden High School suspected of drawing a swastika and making a Hitler salute right in his son's face. Baker was one of several Jewish speakers at the meeting, urging the school trustees to take the unprecedented step of agreeing to hire a Jewish equity coach. The vote was unanimous. All 12 were in favor. The new position will, they think, go a long way towards helping the equity department handle the increased cases of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred being experienced by Jewish students and staff in recent years. Dr. Nili Kaplan-Murth, an Ottawa physician, was elected to the board as a trustee herself this past fall. She introduced the motion to create the new job.
The increase in anti-Semitism in our schools requires urgent action from the OCDSB. Today's motion, if passed, will be a step in the direction of addressing the anti-Semitism in Ottawa public schools. It would be unconscionable to allow any form of racism or discrimination to persist. Our existing staff and resources to support Jewish students and staff are inadequate. We need to hire a Jewish equity coach to significantly advance education about anti-Semitism and to ensure that we have a safe and inclusive environment for Jewish students and staff.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Thursday, January the 19th, 2023. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, sponsored by Metropia. Regular CJN listeners and readers will know that we've been reporting on the disturbing experiences of Jew hatred in Ottawa public schools, from pennies being tossed at students in the hallways to somebody being asked what flavor of gas they liked the best. Then there was the board's hiring of 2 consultants to train staff about anti-Semitism, who compared the Jewish experience of trauma in the Holocaust to what Palestinians feel under Israeli rule. Parent David Baker calls himself an accidental advocate who decided to go public because his son's school was no longer safe. Here's more of what he said.
December 1st, 2022 is a day that I will never forget and one that has changed our family forever. My son came home from school in a state of shock and disbelief because of what he was confronted with while there. He and another Jewish student were specifically targeted to witness a swastika and were greeted with a Hail Hitler salute, both symbols of the mass murder of 6 million people executed in cold blood just for being Jewish. As horrible as that incident is, what was worse was when he was confronted at school a few days later by one of the perpetrators telling him, "You got me on the news, bro. The school overreacted and we're chill, right?" This was after I was assured by the superintendent that I would be notified before these students would be allowed to return to school, a promise that was not kept by your administration. In that time, only one trustee from another ward reached out to me to offer their support. Every other one of you were silent. I cannot help but think that had similar hate been directed to a different group and an equally abhorrent symbol used, such as a burning cross, the reaction would have been very different. Thankfully, the Ottawa police did the right thing and charged your students with incitement of hate and other crimes. Since that incident, 2 others occurred at the same school and police were notified. On December 21st, the intermediate bathroom was closed when a student found a Nazi symbol and anti-Semitic messages on the walls. Last week, under the guise of an anonymous Instagram account, another of your students posted that he was going to corner a specific Jewish student and spray them with a substance so they would know how their dead ancestors felt in the Holocaust. This disgusting and vile vitriol cannot continue. You as a board should be ashamed of what has been going on and need to take action. I am angry and upset, an accidental advocate who did not ask for this. But as a parent, you cannot sit still or stay quiet while your child is in danger.
The Jewish community and teachers have been lobbying the school board for nearly 2 years on this issue, with little success, but after the Ontario municipal elections in October brought in a new slate of trustees, it felt the complaints might finally be taken as seriously as are cases of racism against other marginalized groups. And they were right. The trustees voted unanimously to hire the Jewish equity coach, although that will still have to be ratified at a meeting later this year. But here's the new acting director of education, Michelle Giroux.
I listened carefully to the delegations and appreciate very much what they shared this evening. And as noted, we are in fact experiencing a rise in anti-Semitism and hate in our community, and that's showing up in our schools. It is difficult to hear about and to understand the unacceptable anti-Semitic actions, messages, threats, and behaviors that have been experienced. And I'm very sorry that any student, employee, trustee, or family member has had to have that experience.
Elementary school teacher Lisa Levitan has been acting as the unofficial point person for the community. She's been waiting for this day for years. She joins me now from her home in Ottawa. First of all, congratulations is in order, is it not?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. This has been a long battle, almost 2 years in the making, where we've been trying to have the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board acknowledge and understand that there is a desperate need for Jewish representation in their equity department to ensure that we combat anti-Semitism in the schools and that there is an authentic lived experience voice ready to support and help students and staff and families that are in need. This is just, it's a wonderful, wonderful day.
The equity department itself, shouldn't it have been dealing with this the way it deals with anti-Black racism or anti-Indigenous racism or anti-Asian? Like, tell me how it was dealt with and why you needed to have this new motion to have an actual Jewish equity coach.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because yes, I, as a teacher, I teach grade 2 French immersion. I'm in the classroom. I don't really look at what the board has in terms of senior staff in different departments. And when anti-Semitism rose to exponential heights, certainly in our schools, I decided to look into what we had in terms of support for students, staff, and families as they were facing Jewish hate in schools. And I found the equity department. And I went to this equity department and kind of researched what they had available. And I was very surprised to see that they had immense support and thrilled to see that they had immense support for anti-Black racism, Indigenous people, LGBTQ. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And yet, for some reason, we were missing the Jewish people, the Jewish people who are consistently and consecutively breaking records for the most hate crimes of any religious group. We were nowhere. There was no support for any Jewish student, staff, or families at all. And this is when I knew we had a problem. And I immediately started speaking to senior staff and superintendents, the director, the trustees, my union, and the Jewish Federation of Ottawa to say, hey, we've got to do something here. There's over 70,000 students at the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, and certainly the other marginalized groups that are already part of the equity department don't just have one person, it's a team of people.
Why specifically do you think that a Jewish equity coach would be one of the solutions?
So what has been happening essentially forever is that if a Jewish child or teacher or family is experiencing anti-Semitism and immense Jewish hate in the schools, they are sent to a non-Jewish equity support staff person. And that's when we realized that as this was happening, multiple mistakes were being made and were actually causing further harm to our Jewish community. It is inappropriate and offensive to have unqualified non-Jewish staff advise on anti-Semitism. It is paramount that this Jewish equity coach be the main point of contact when hiring anyone to teach about anti-Semitism in the OCDSB schools. They also canceled the Honorable Erwin Kotler from presenting to teachers with less than 24 hours notice, saying that he was controversial. They phoned numerous Jewish organizations asking very inappropriate and offensive questions. And these are just a few examples of what cannot continue. So just as they, and we should all listen to authentic, lived, experienced Black voices when learning about anti-Black racism, they must also listen to authentic, lived, experienced Jewish voices when learning about anti-Semitism.
besides the list of what you called egregious things that they did, what about having Jews included in the new sort of safety app or this sort of reporting tool? Tell me what that was and why it was so upsetting when they forgot to put Jews in.
Yes, you know, I was so excited when I saw in the fall of 2022 that the OCDSB launched their OCDSB Cares program. And the program goal was for students to anonymously report any hate that they were experiencing in schools. I thought this was fantastic. But we were left off the list. And I couldn't believe that every other marginalized group was there except us. We were missing, and they wouldn't have forgotten about us if they had Jewish representation in that equity department who created that questionnaire. So given all the hate that Jewish students, staff, and families have been experiencing in the OCDSB, especially this past year and a half, to once again be forgotten wasn't only offensive, but it was like inconceivable. We couldn't believe it.
Well, it was just like, this is like the trend of equity departments forgetting Jews, but it's more also about the Zionism and Israel-Palestine question.
Yeah.
And I wonder how having an equity coach, a Jewish equity coach, will or will not mitigate that problem as well, where Jews are seen as the oppressors because of what's happening in Israel.
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting, and especially in one of the delegations from last night, who I would say is certainly not an ally, who spoke up and was the founder of Independent Jewish Voices. And what she basically said was that if we're having a Jewish equity coach, we must have an anti-Palestinian equity coach. And to that, I say, I'm not Palestinian. I would never expect somebody who identifies as Palestinian to speak up for me as a Jewish person. So if there are any other identities that feel that there is hate being brought upon them at the school board, I urge them to come forward and make sure that they're represented. That being said, this is not an Israeli equity coach. This is a Jewish equity coach because there is Jewish hate happening in our schools.
I want to pivot a little bit to the timing of the meeting, because it came about after the Ottawa police charged 2 young people at Sir Robert Borden School. So how encouraged are you by this decision to actually formally charge somebody? What does that mean to you and your work?
To me, from the perspective of a teacher, I'm horrified that this happened, but important to note that I receive, and it's been a year and a half, I receive 2 to 3 calls or emails or messages a day of different instances of anti-Semitism and Jewish hate happening in our school board. So I'm exhausted, but know that although, and I don't want to take anything away from what happened at SRB in December, absolutely not. It was horrific, and I'm glad that somebody is finally speaking up. But if I'm being really honest, in terms of the other calls I've received, I would rate this a 2 out of 10 at best in terms of how the severity of it. So that tells you, it gives you a little bit of insight into the absolutely unbelievable attacks that Jewish students have been facing. And I'm not talking just verbal or threatening, I'm talking physical, and I'm talking harassment, and just really, really terrifying, to the point where some Jewish families have hidden in their homes for months at a time, not knowing if they were safe. Many Jewish students from the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, their parents have decided to switch them over to the Catholic board for safety. Jewish teachers have also switched out. This should not be happening. So when it comes to these 2 boys who are now being in the hands of the police and what comes next, although I certainly don't think that what they did was good in any way, shape, or form, there absolutely needs to be a consequence. I do feel this could have been prevented. I do feel that if the OCDSB would have taken action, proactive measures to ensure that education was given to these boys and to all students for that matter, almost 2 years ago, that perhaps we wouldn't be where we are today. And that's why it's important that this Jewish equity coach ensures that they hire the correct and appropriate and accurate factual, I'm talking focus on the facts, ensure that they hire the right people to give this training, and to ensure that above all else, all students and all parents and all staff at this school board know that there is a zero hate tolerance, period, end of sentence. And we need to everything, to me, starts with education. And these two boys, whatever happens with them, to me, the number one thing needs to be education.
Ontario's Education Minister Stephen Lecce says other school boards should look at Ottawa's example and do the same thing to fight anti-Semitism.
There are problems with anti-Semitism in schools. It's why the government of Ontario is stepping up with mandatory Holocaust education starting in grade 6, given that 90% of incidents start in grade 7 and 8. We need school boards to step up and do a better job of enforcing, of creating a culture where it's unacceptable to target Jewish children. We have strength in training. I have leveraged the wisdom of the Jewish community, particularly through Friends of Samuel Wiesenthal, UJA, as well as CJA, to provide training to educators and principals. And I'm going to continue to be an ally to confront this historic scourge. Anything and everything governments, school boards, communities can do should be seriously considered to make sure Jewish kids, who are a small minority in the Ottawa community, are given the respect that they deserve in a pluralistic democracy like Canada.
Lisa Levitan says she hopes the board will move quickly and hire this new Jewish equity coach by the spring. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia: integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Today's listener shout-out goes to Brenda Rothenberg in Toronto. And we'll end with a bit of Rabbi Elizabeth Bolton's closing speech to the Ottawa school trustees. She sang a song in Hebrew, which she says Jewish activists performed for the late American black civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., to the tune of "We Shall Overcome." Thanks for listening. See you Monday.
Anu nitkaber, anu nitkaber, anu nitkaber. בבוא היום אני מאמין באמונה שלמה נתגבר בבוא היום. Thank you.